I have a front row seat to Aaron Smith at the Shrine Bowl, and I know exactly what I'm looking for in his performance over the next 3 days. Oh, yeah. It's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listener of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Tarik Cohen returning to his alma mater of North Carolina A&T, what this means not only for Cohen, but then also, and I would argue more so, for North Carolina A&T as an institution. In segment 2, we have a new coach out there at Mississippi Valley State. This is big time. Terrell Buckley coming to lead the Delta Devils. But in number 1, the lead-off segment, what exactly is it that I'm looking for out of Aaron Smith? For those who don't know, Aaron Smith is the South Carolina State linebacker, one of the leaders of that defense, and he will be at the East-West Shrine Bowl. It'll be out here in Texas, so I am going to be there for the first 3 days of practice. The last day is basically like a run-through. So I'll be there for the 3 padded practices that they're going to have. And I know exactly what it is that I want to look for out of them. And I hate to start it off with the very generic one, but the truth is he has to look like he belongs. If everything else I ask for out of him does not happen, yet he looks like he belongs, then we are okay. I would make the argument that the things I'm talking about are more so excelling opposed to just look like you belong. But here's the truth. I said it on yesterday's episode, I believe. I think that was yesterday's episode. I spoke about it and I said, listen, small school students or small school athletes do not have the luxury. Small school athletes do not have the luxury of going into these all-star pre-draft games and not playing well. They don't. See, if I'm at South Carolina, I might be able to, I had a rough day, maybe in a rough 2 days. Rough 3 days might hurt anybody, but a rough 1 or 2 days and you come out and you look good, really good on the other one. Oh, yeah. That's Aaron Smith we saw from South Carolina. That's the Gamecock linebacker we knew. It's almost like we're looking for confirmation. I think that may be the best way to say it. As we see Carson Vincent, as we see Aaron Smith go into the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, it's not about confirmation. It's about proving something. While bigger school prospects, they just have to confirm the belief that a lot of scouts already had in them. You have to validate, okay, I was a big fish in a small pond, but I can't go to being a small fish in a big pond. You have to prove that you can last, that you can hang with the big dogs. That, at the end of the day, is the most important trait, no matter if we're talking about block shedding or setting your feet and anchor, all of these things. You got to look like you belong. If you look outclassed when you go out there, you've lost, and you probably are not going to get drafted because of it. That is the real life situation that we're working with as a small school prospect. So that's why it's number 1. And as cliche as it says, it will be number 1 by a wide margin for a long time. The next thing that I'm looking for out of him is I want to see how he sorts through mess. Right? Like, I want to see when the run is coming at him and he has to discard of offensive linemen, how does he do it? Does he do it well? Because he's not a huge player. And the biggest upside with him is his ranginess. But it's not necessarily what he can do when things are compact. It's not about what he can do in a tunnel. I want to see that. We're going to talk to Gerald tomorrow about what he wants to see from this player. And it's a little bit different than I have, right? Like my criteria is I want to see the things that are not great about him look better. Like I want to see if you're light, how do you deal with heavier people? How do you follow the offensive lineman, the mental aspect of it? So it's what isn't your strength, which is sorting through bigger players. I mean, it makes sense. And then also what I think will get him the biggest advantage, which is the mental aspect. The physicality, that's one thing I would like to see that improve. Mentally, I want to see if you are one step ahead of everybody. I want to see if when the offensive linemen are pulling, are you pulling with them? Are you getting tricked easily? Do you look like when you're in zone coverage that you're calm? Are you poised? Or do you seem like I really don't understand what I'm doing? That's all about looking like you belong, but that's also being one of the standouts. I'll have my eye on Aaron Smith, but he has to catch other people's eye. So Gerald, on the other hand, and you'll hear more about this tomorrow, and I give him credit because this was definitely his take, and I don't want to try to claim credit for it or anything. But Gerald was like, I know he's rangy. I need him to go be rangy. And it is simple. It's like, hey, go do what you're good at. Go be you. I took it from an approach of they doubt your ability in these aspects. And I could argue that it would be a larger gap because we're talking about bigger offensive linemen. So that is definitely something I want to see. And I still feel that way. But I put my focus on that. Gerald said my focus is on the rangy guy being rangy. Let me see you in 7-on-7. Let me see what you do when you're in coverage. Because at the end of the day, I know who Aaron Smith is, and he's best used in coverage. If you can't show me your best ability on the biggest stage, you're not going to be of much use. And when he said it, it was like, oh my God. It was really like this moment of, dang, have I been looking at it the wrong way? But no, I think it's just honestly two different points of view. I think both are important. So you'll see a lot of running in these practices. I'll see a lot of running. You probably won't see a lot of it. I don't think you'll see a lot of Aaron Smith just publicly. He's not an edge rusher, so you're not going to see one-on-ones. He's not a cornerback or a wide receiver, so you're not going to see one-on-ones in that aspect. For the most part, a lot of it will be how are you operating within that tunnel? Are you getting swallowed up by offensive linemen? I just want to see things. I just want to see things about that. The running game is my biggest aspect for Aaron Smith. You know, and this isn't to say that he can't do it, but one of the biggest differences we see between the FCS and the FBS is the size of the trenches. And everybody's going to be fast. So that pulling guard is going to come around. And when he comes around, he's heading right your way. How are you going to react to that? You know, the dragging wide receiver out the slot. How are you going to handle that? Are you going to get hands on them? I just want to see these aspects. I think that these aspects are important because if you look like, why we invite that guy? That's going to be a negative. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, you shouldn't be under that amount of pressure to have at least, I feel like you got to have 2.5 good days as an HBCU player. As an HBCU athlete going into this type of event, I don't necessarily know if you can get the most out of this or get the most eyes if you don't have 2.5 good days. You can't have one really bad day. They already Xing you out. If you have a really bad day, you gotta have a really great day. You gotta cut that, and now it's even, and now it's on day 3. But as we push forward, I want to look at Terrell Buckley, the newest head coach in the SWAC, and he completes the HBCU coaching cycle in 2025. So let's look at all of that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by TalkSpace. Therapy is a game changer, and it can help manage stress, improve sleep, communicate more efficiently, all of these things. Listen, TalkSpace is the leading virtual therapy provider and makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. We want all of those things. And with TalkSpace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs usually in about 48 hours. And it's convenient, so you can do it all within the comfort of your own house. I know people want that. I can't even blame them. So as a listener, you'll get $80 off your first month with TalkSpace when you go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to talkspace.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code space80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's talkspace.com/lockedoncollege and the promo code is space80. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on College Football. The season is over. It's still fresh, but now we're getting into the next season because football never stops. It's 24/7, 365. Terrell Buckley is the head coach of Mississippi Valley State. And I think that this is a really interesting hire because it puts a couple of things directly in front of my face. One thing you'll see about me as we continue, I know I've been here for 3 years, and shout out to you if you've been here from the beginning, right? Like, that's a real everydayer. You've been here since the very beginning. Sheesh. Hopefully you've seen some growth in me. Hopefully you know a little bit about me. But one thing that I will say is that, in my opinion, I don't always consider every single avenue. But when the avenue is put in front of my face, it's like, oh, let me think about this. For me, that's a representation in Buckley's professional history, right? Like his professional coaching history. As a player, man, this dude has 50 interceptions. There's 40 players in NFL history, and the game been played for a very long time. There's only 40 players who have 50 or more interceptions, and Terrell Buckley is one of that crew. So you can't take away what he did as a player. He was one of the better guys in the league at taking the ball away, had an 8 interception season, had a 6 interception season. But at the same time, you don't want to put too much stock into his playing career, not because of how it was, just because it doesn't always translate to coaching. So you want to see what else has he done. He didn't just jump into this. I know I named that he's not a name who gets you immediate recognition. So I don't know even if I would put him on the same tier as Deshaun Jackson, Michael Vick, Eddie George, Deion Sanders. But I also think that Buckley's background doesn't necessarily fit with being called a celebrity coach. No, he's worked his way up the ranks, right? Like he was an assistant. He was a safeties assistant. He was a wide receiver assistant. He was a grad assistant. So Buckley is not a guy who played in the league and now wants to coach and say, oh, let me go do this. No, he has a pretty solid, lengthy resume as far as a coach, where I would say his best experience is being a cornerbacks coach at Ole Miss, at not Mississippi Valley State, but at Mississippi State. So he has ties to the area. He has ties to Mississippi. He's from Mississippi. He worked at Mississippi State. He worked at Ole Miss. He ended up going to Florida State for school. But in general, that's a lot of experience, right? So at Mississippi State, at Ole Miss, he was a cornerbacks coach. At Ole Miss, he was an assistant coach. But I want to read some of the things that are on his bio on this Ole Miss website. And it's mostly praise for his Mississippi State tenure, but this shows you how well his cornerbacks have performed. First off, he has connection to Jair Alexander, who we've seen what he's become in the NFL. But then at Mississippi Valley State specifically, 2018, they say arguably the most dominant defense in Mississippi State history. They were led by Cameron Dantzler. I don't know if you remember Cameron Dantzler, but let me tell you this. He was a dog. He was a freaking dog. They were led by him, and Mississippi State's cornerbacks didn't allow a single touchdown. All right, let's cut real quick right here. If I'm looking at a cornerbacks coach and my cornerbacks don't allow a single touchdown all year, and I'm not talking about Cameron Dantzler didn't allow this touchdown. I'm saying all of Mississippi State's cornerbacks held their intended targets without touchdowns. That is extremely impressive. And when an entire unit does something like this, you have to look to the coach and the cornerbacks coach specifically. It'd be one thing if your top corner was just like, oh, yeah, he didn't give up any touchdowns, but none of my corners let up touchdowns. Yeah, that's a huge, huge feather in the cap of your cornerbacks coach, who happened to be Terrell Buckley. So if you're looking at what his immediate impact will be, maybe it'll be with the cornerbacks. It's always interesting to me when you're looking at head coaches. Are you going to come in and be a defensive play caller? If not, it allows you to just kind of move around. And in a sense, you can be a secondary coach, right? Like you can be a guy who comes in and talks to the corners more than you talk to everybody else, because you can do that with one position and still float around and touch every single room. Like that's not a difficult thing, in my opinion. I don't think it's hard to do that. Now, focused on the entire defense, it'll be hard to get over to the offense. But just be like, okay, I'm gonna linger around these cornerbacks for a while, give them some of my expertise, but I'm not gonna disregard the other rooms. I think that is a completely doable aspect. But you keep going, and he has success at Ole Miss. Now, here's the thing that I have to confront myself about when it comes to Terrell Buckley. You want to coach with professional experience. Like, that always sounds good. Oh, we have professional experience, and he's coming down to the collegiate level. We want to boost that. My only problem is his professional experience was being the head coach of the Orlando Guardians in the XFL. I shouldn't have paused there because that'll make it seem like there's a problem with the XFL. But the real problem is that he went 1-9. That's the issue. So, yeah, he has professional experience, but it's not successful professional experience. So, how do I weigh that? How much stock do I put in the fact that he was a coach for a professional league? I think that understanding the business, yeah, but I don't know if that's the lead. And my only problem is I would lead with what he did for the cornerbacks on the SEC level. Like Mississippi State had some of the best defense, some of the best pass defenses in the conference, in the country, when Buckley was their cornerbacks coach. To me, that is the lead. That is the thing to put at the top. That is the deadline, or not the deadline, the headline. Then you come in and you talk about the fact that he's been a head coach. But if you're going to be a head coach at Mississippi Valley State, it would logically make sense to bring up he's been a head coach before, because that's what attracts most people. The only problem is if I look at that head coaching resume, I'm not really a fan of it. If I look at that head coaching resume, I'm not really a fan of it. So that's something a little bit difficult for me to grasp. Orlando Guardians went 1-9. Mississippi Valley State, you got to be patient. I think bringing in somebody who you can flash, look at what I did. This is what I did. I love that. That is something that for me personally, it'll always be a selling point. And I think because I think it gets the respect of the room. At the end of the day, I think that it gets you the respect of the room. But at the same time, I don't necessarily know if the professional aspect was great. So it makes me a little bit hesitant, even though I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison. I like this hire from Mississippi Valley State. I want to say that because I think questioning his professional experience would make you think maybe Darian doesn't like this hire. But no, Darian is cool with this hire. This is a solid hire, in my opinion. Now, moving forward, I love this hire. And that is Tarik Cohen, who is coming back to North Carolina A&T in more of a support role. But Sean Gibbs broke this news, and let me tell you what, this is a continuation of bringing that old North Carolina A&T back, and I'll always support that. And I'll tell you why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the only place that I would ever go for any of my ticket needs. Honestly, I don't care if it's wrestling, because y'all know I'm a big wrestling fan. I don't care if it's football. I don't care if it's basketball. Maybe I want to go to a Mavericks game because it's around. I want to go watch the Pels. I don't want to have to travel out to New Orleans. I want to watch the Grizzlies. I don't want to go to Memphis. I want to go watch the Timberwolves. I don't want to go to Minnesota, right? So I get to watch my team and then two of my favorite players, but I'm going to Dallas because it's easier for me. Either way, it doesn't matter. Maybe athletics isn't your thing. You just like to hear me talk. Salute to you. But maybe that's the case. You can see ballet, you can see theater, you can comedy shows, you have concerts, everything. There's so many different options. It's not just limited to athletic events. If there is an event going on in your city, if there's a ticket to be bought, you can find it on Gametime. But it's on you. Download the app, create the account, and you'll go ahead and get $20 off your first purchase when you use the code LOCKEDONCollege. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling and wrap up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Tarik Cohen is returning to North Carolina A&T, but not as a coach. He's going to be more of a support staffer, right? Like he'll come on for player development. So he's not going to be the running backs coach, which would be probably your initial thought. Your initial thought would probably be, oh, Tarik Cohen's coming on. He's going to be the North Carolina A&T running backs coach, which maybe one day he works up to that. Maybe he decides to do that, you know? But Sean Gibbs was on an interview and he spoke about Cohen coming back. And I think that this is good for Cohen. I think that this is good for A&T. And I think just in general, it's a win-win, mutually beneficial scenario. You're looking at a guy who is one of the greatest players in that institution's history, one of the most notable players in that institution's history. And he was a player who played running back at a school that was called the HBCU Running Back University. So I think all of those things are important because you bring name recognition. Those guys who are coming in, they know Tarik Cohen, and they probably know what Cohen's going through and what he's been through as far as his health. Listen, on this show, we've talked about the battles that Tarik Cohen has had trying to make it back to the league. That dream is obviously done, but it was just injury after injury after injury. And it wasn't even like a bunch of nicks and bruises. No, it was, I tore my ACL, I'm coming back, and boom, I tore it again. And it's like just poor luck, in my opinion. But why is that important? Not because of, oh, well, if he was playing football, he wouldn't be here. Yeah, duh. But also because that is the exact role that he is suited for at North Carolina A&T, of saying, what is life after football? We talk about HBCUs and the athletic part of it, but I think just not something we talk about on this show, but the building of men. This is not something that is a common topic for us, but the building of men. You have to prepare all of those guys for life after football. The majority of people on a collegiate roster are not going to play football after they leave college. That's just the facts of it all. Some will try to go overseas and do that. But even when you factor in the people who, I'm not just talking about the NFL. Let's bring in the NFL, the XFL, the overseas leagues, the arena football, and Canadian Football League. Let's bring them all. The majority of people on your roster are not going to fall in those bunches. Excuse me. And it also grows when you talk about HBCUs. It's just, or more so, the numbers lessens, the amount of people who won't play grow. So now you bring Tarik Cohen in, who had to face, hey, this is what life is like without football head on. That's difficult. That is difficult for a player who was an elite athlete to have that moment ripped away from him. But everybody, Lord willing, you have a life after football. Tarik Cohen is a guy who I think is perfectly suited to tell you, this is how you need to move. This is how you need to operate. This is how you need to prepare, whether it's from things he did or things he wished he did. You know, one of my favorite lines is by DMX. He said, I go through what I go through so you don't have to. You should be glad to have the word statue. I love that lyric because it's a situation where sometimes I bump my head so you don't have to bump your head. And I think that line perfectly articulates it. And I love the person who did it. DMX was the perfect guy to do it because I've been immortalized. You know who I am. You should be glad to have the word statue because of all of the things I went through. I can be that representation. There are some moving statues. There are some living statues. Yes. Tarik Cohen is one of those. I wanted to interject and say this also. I understand that it seems as if he's not going to be connected with football at all. But in my opinion, Tarik Cohen will not be able to avoid advising running backs. And the reason I say he won't be able to avoid it is, let's say that he said, I don't really want to just come out and give advice. I don't want to be the running backs coach. I understand I'm one of the better running backs in school history, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for helping life after football. That's all good. Do we really believe that those kids aren't going to ask questions? And if they ask questions, I'm sure he'll answer it. Hey, what did you think about this? I would have done this. Or I like that you did this. When you did this move, I saw this. I don't think that is what he's seeking out to do. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think he's here to help for life after football because that's where he's at in his career. So it makes sense. It aligns. But at the same time, he's one of the best running backs in North Carolina A&T history. He's a dynamic running back, and he's going to be at the fingertips of all these student athletes. He may not unprovoked give that information out, get that information out unprovoked, but I do think that information is going to come out in some way or another. So if it's not him being a running backs coach, it's not him actually being a part of the coaching staff, there'll still be a benefit of having Tarik Cohen that they will see on their team. You won't see the effect of who they are after football on your team. That's still a great policy, but you won't see it on your team. I think Tariq Cohen will have many conversations with many athletes that does impact things that we see on the field in 2025. So I just want to interject and say that real quick. Back to the program, though. Life after football is great. Now, this is also a return to the old North Carolina A&T. We've seen so many coaches go from or join the Aggie staff now. I think that this is just bringing in a former player. The standard has not been the standard at A&T for the last couple of years. They need a revamp. They need a reboot. And I think that Sean Gibbs is knowing, he's aware of what that rebuild and reboot looks like. It looks like bringing in guys who know what greatness looks like, knows the steps to make it to greatness. Have they succeeded in the CAA? No, they haven't succeeded they haven't succeeded in that conference, mostly because they haven't been there. But they do know what greatness and hard work that it takes to make it to greatness looks like. I love this. Great move, mutually beneficial move. On tomorrow's episode, we'll have Gerald Huggins on the show, and Gerald will be talking about Aaron Smith, who we talked about today. He'll be talking about Carson Vincent, specifically the one-on-ones between offensive linemen and edge rushers and what you should be looking for. Everybody's going to watch them, but what should you be looking for to make yourself a smarter viewer? That's what I try to do every time I'm on here, and that's what I believe he does every time he comes on here as well. So in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, that'll be 6:30 on Friday. Don't forget about it. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.